Most jazz piano tutorials already assume you know a ton, and if you're classically trained like I was, you probably don't. And that's why we're making this short series to help total beginners start jazz piano comping with confidence today. So we're gonna cut out the fluff, ditch the overwhelm, and get right to it so you can start playing now. Sound impossible? Stick around and let me know in the comments if this works for you. If you're new here, my name's Jonathan, and on this channel we provide practical tutorials you can implement right away to speed up your piano progress. We're going to start with Rootless Voicings. These are the chords that you'll play when you're playing with a bass player and either an instrumentalist or a singer. These are rootless because it's the bass player's job to play the root of each chord, so we don't want to play the root, otherwise we're going to be doubling that and creating clashes. The only pieces of knowledge of this you'll need is a general understanding of scales, as well as an understanding of major 7th, minor 7th, and dominant 7th chords. We'll go through them briefly here, but if you want a deeper dive, you might want to check out this video here and then come back. The major 7th chord is just 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the major scale. So if we're trying to figure out, say, a C major 7th chord, that would just be 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the C major scale. If we were trying to figure out a D major 7th chord, think D major scale, 1, 3, 5, and 7. When you see a chord symbol with a triangle and 7, that's the chord, major 7th chord. From there, to figure out a minor 7th chord, all you'll do is take your major 7th chord and lower the 3rd and 7th. So that'll be your minor 7th chord. And then a dominant 7th chord, again, taking major 7th as sort of your baseline from which you make any changes, you're going to lower the 7th by a half step. For this, we're actually going to take it a step further with an extra extension by adding the 9th. That will be the same note regardless of which of these chords you're playing. So C major 9, C minor 9, or C dominant 9. Now let's talk about these chords in context. Jazz harmony really isn't all that different from traditional harmony. It just uses the 7ths and then the upper extensions, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths much more freely. But we're going to keep it very simple for this tutorial and give you just the bare minimum you need to start comping right now. Let's say we're in the key of C major. We could just play through all the harmonies using the 7th chords. So you have the 1 chord, that's a C major 7 chord, the 2 chord, that's a D minor 7, the 3 chord, that's an E minor 7, the 4 chord, that's an F major 7th chord, the 5 chord, that's the G dominant 7th chord. So dominant, as you probably already know, that'll be the 5 chord. And then the 6 chord, that'll be a minor 7th chord. And then the 7 chord, which you're not going to see a ton of, that is a half diminished 7 chord. Don't even worry about that right now. And you can do that same exercise adding the 9ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's the basis of jazz harmony. So now I'm going to show you the voicings. That's when we play around with where we put the 3s and the 7s and the 9s and things like that to get you comping right now. I'll start by showing you the voicings and then we'll apply them to a simple tune. Let's say we're figuring out a rootless voicing for a C major 7th chord. So we have 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 to play around with. And as you know, we're going to leave out the root, so we're not going to play C for that. Now we have 2 voicings we can use. These are referred to as type A and type B voicings in Jeremy Siskinn's phenomenal book, Jazz Piano Fundamentals. If you're serious about learning jazz, that's a highly recommended book. I'll include a link below in the comments. And so type A, that's going to be 3, 7, 9, 5. So that's a simple rootless voicing for a C major 7th chord. You can apply this to any of the other chords, so like a C dominant 7th, 3, 7, 9, 5, or C minor 7, 3, 7, 9, 5. And if you want to hear how it'll sound with the root for full context, you can play the root in a low octave with your left hand, put the pedal down, and then play the rest of the chord, and then you're going to hear how it'll sound with the full context with the root. And then we have type B, so if I do the same chord, instead of 3, 7, 9, 5, I'm going to start with 7 and play 7, 3, 5, 9. Here's a trick I like to use to remember the difference. We know that the left hand is always going to use 3-7 or 7-3. So I remember that type A is going to do those in numerical order or in the order of chord tones with 3 and 7. So type A would be 3, 7. And then with both types, type A and type B, the right hand is going to start with whatever the next one is after the top note of my left hand. So my left hand is playing 3, 7. The next chord tone, if we're thinking 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, is going to be 9. And that just leaves 5, for the last one. And then if we're using that same trick, type B, I know that's flipped, so that's going to be 7, 3. Next chord tone after 3 is 5, and then I know the last one will be 9. So to get started with this, go ahead and just try figuring out some of these voicings with some random chords, maybe a D major 7 or a B minor 7, just to start gradually getting used to this universe of figuring out rootless chord voicings. By the way, if you're enjoying this, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video as part of this series and anything else we publish. Now there are some tricks that are going to help you, the first being that most of the chord progressions you're going to play in jazz will be 2-5-1s. So if you just remember a few different patterns, you can already start playing quite a few jazz tunes. Let's take, for example, a 2-5-1 in C major. So that would be a D minor 7, followed by G dominant 7, and then C major 7. So we can start with, say, a type A voicing. So that would be 3, 7, 9, 5. Now here's what's cool with a 2-5-1, you can smoothly alternate from type A to type B to type A, or vice versa for some really smooth, cool voice leading. So this would be type A for D minor, and then if I just move these middle notes down one, I get type B voicing for G dominant 7, and then when I move the outer notes down, I get a type A voicing for the C major 7. And if you want to hear that with the root, that would be 2, 5, 1. Now there are some tricks here that will make this easier for you. One is to recognize the intervals that are happening here. So we have 3, 7, 9, 5 for the D minor 7. This note will go down a half step, this one will go down a whole step to bring me to my G dominant 7 voicing. And then I basically follow the same pattern now with the outer notes. Now the bottom note will move down a half step, upper note will move down a whole step for my major 7 chord. You can do something similar if you start with a type B voicing. So that will be 7, 3, 9, 5, except this time I'm going to start by moving the outer notes first. So half step down on the bottom, whole step down on the top. That gives me my type A, 3, 7, 9, 5 for G dominant 7, and then I'll move the middle notes down a half step, down a whole step. There's my type B, C major 7 chord voicing. Now I think these are best learned in the context of tunes, learning lead sheets rather than just doing lots of exercises. But if you want to try an exercise, a cool one you can do to get used to this pattern, acclimating it, getting it into your muscle memory, is starting with a 2-5-1, we'll say C major, so 2, 5, 1. I ended with my type A. If I lower my left hand down by a half step, that brings me to a minor 7 chord, setting me up for a new 2-5-1, this time in B flat major. 2, 5, 1. I can do the same thing, down a half step, 2, 5, 1. That has a good way of helping your fingers get used to these different interval movements and helping you sort of intuitively find these 2-5-1 rootless voicings quickly. A great tune to get started with this is Tune Up, because it's basically a bunch of 2-5-1 progressions. And so when you're looking at a lead sheet like this, it's helpful to sort of analyze it first so you know what keys you're in. And whenever you see a minus sign 7 followed by just the 7, followed by either a triangle 7 or an MAJ 7, like you see in this tune a lot, you can take that as a cue that this is likely a 2-5-1 progression. So just to dissect the first 4 chords here, we have an E minor 7th chord, so we can play 3, 7, 9, 5. That's our type A voicing. Going to an A dominant 7, so 7, 3, 5, 9. And then lowering these outer 2 notes for 3, 7, 9, 5 for the D major 7. I'll play that once more. So E minor 7, A dominant 7, D major 7. So just like with classical music, a great way to get started is to just isolate these 2-5-1s and practice them slowly many times in a row until they feel much more intuitive. Even if it feels like, if you were like me when I first started this, I felt like I had to painstakingly figure out where my 3 was and where my 7 and my 9. Just practice one simple voice leading, 2, 5, 1, many times until it feels really intuitive. Then you can move on to the next 2-5-1. So for now, just to go through the rest of these voicings, I'm going to continue starting with a type A, but remember you could start with a type B. So if you did that, that would be 7, 3, 9, 5. So that's my 2, 5, 1. But for now, I'd like to start with type A. So we have E minor 7, going to A dominant 7, going to D major 7. And this works out pretty nicely because my left hand can just drop down a half step. That brings me to my D minor 7. Same exact voice leading, 5, 1, and then I'm going to bring my left hand down a half step again. That sets me up for a 2, 5, 1 in B flat major, 2, 5, 1. I'm just going to pause there for a moment just to bring to your attention that we're basically following the same little whole step and half step movements there for all of those 2, 5, 1s, so that should make it pretty accessible to play quickly. And then in the next line we have a little bit of a detour. We have the 2 of D, but then we have a 5, 1 in B flat, so we'll need to navigate that a little bit. I'll do type A, type B for B flat major 7, and then I can go to, let's say, a type B again for A dominant 7, and then I'll just switch back to here to get back to the beginning for my E minor 7. A lot of times people will ask if it's helpful to write these out. It can be helpful as an exercise, but with jazz sort of being a non-notational, we're not really reading a whole lot off of the page sort of art form, I think the sooner you can get used to finding these chord tones on the keyboard, the better. And also, if you're like me, I found that when I started doing this, it actually helped quite a bit with my classical music analysis. An incredible app you can use to practice this is iReal Pro. With this, you can basically punch in the chords to any tune you want, and it will generate a cool backing track so that you can practice hearing and playing along with basically a virtual bass player and drummer, even a pianist, but I would recommend opening up the mixer and turning off the piano so that you're basically playing with the group. So something like this. And back to the top. Now that's just part of it, because once you have these voicings down, you're going to want to add some rhythmic patterns to your comping to start playing with people. We're going to cover that right here in part 2. I'll see you over there, and if it's not there yet, it just means I haven't published it, but I wanted to have one of these cool outros. So thanks for bearing. See you there.